I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a simple mistake after too many drinks and a little nostalgia. Now I'm staring at legal papers on my kitchen table, and everyone acts like I'm the villain, but I know I was only trying to keep my life together. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The downtown wine bar hummed with Friday night energy as I nursed my third glass of Pinot Grigio. When Jonas Leach walked through the door, my heart did that familiar flutter it hadn't done in years. My ex-boyfriend looked good, better than when we dated in our 20s. His designer stubble and fitted jacket reminded me why I'd fallen for him back then. Evadne, is that really you? Jonas's smile was magnetic as he approached my table, where I sat with my sister Lila and a few co-workers. Jonas, what a surprise, I replied, trying to sound casual despite the warmth spreading through my chest. Matthew was home with 6-year-old Nina, probably helping with homework and making dinner. The thought made me feel both guilty and resentful. As the evening progressed, my co-workers drifted away. Then Lila excused herself, leaving Jonas and me alone. The wine made everything seem softer, more romantic. We talked about old times, shared laughs, and I found myself leaning closer when he spoke. You know, you haven't changed a bit, Jonas said, his fingers brushing mine across the table. Still beautiful, still that spark in your eyes. I should have gone home then. Should have called an Uber and returned to my family. Instead, I let Jonas order another bottle. My place isn't far, he suggested around midnight. We could continue catching up somewhere quieter. His loft was exactly what I'd expected. Exposed brick, modern furniture, artwork covering the walls. We sat on his leather couch, the city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. The wine and nostalgia clouded my judgment as Jonas moved closer. I always wondered what would have happened if we'd stayed together, he murmured, his hand finding my knee. What happened next felt like a dream. We kissed, we talked, we laughed. When I woke up the next morning in his bed, fully clothed, but with my hair messed and makeup smeared, panic set in. I grabbed my purse and rushed out, calling an Uber home. Matthew was making breakfast when I slipped through the front door of our apartment. His dark eyes searched my face as I tried to smooth my hair. You're home late, he said quietly. I was worried. I lost track of time, I said, forcing a bright smile. You know how it is with the girls. We got to talking and drinking wine, and before I knew it, I shrugged helplessly. I crashed at Lila's. Matthew nodded slowly, but something in his expression told me he wasn't entirely convinced. Nina bounced into the kitchen, her blonde pigtails flying, and I hugged her tight, inhaling her sweet scent. Mommy, you smell different, she said innocently. My phone buzzed with a text from Jonas. Last night was wild. Should we talk? I quickly deleted it, but not before Matthew noticed my flustered expression. Everything okay? He asked, moving closer. Just work stuff, I lied, slipping the phone into my pocket. You know how demanding my boss can be. Monday morning at the office felt different. Conversation stopped when I walked by, and I caught my co-workers exchanging meaningful glances. Sarah, the receptionist, cornered me by the coffee machine. So, how was your weekend? She asked with a knowing smirk. I heard you ran into Jonas Leach at Meridian. My stomach dropped. It was nothing, just bumped into an old friend. That's not what I heard, Sarah continued. Someone said you two left together around midnight. Heat flooded my cheeks. People love to gossip about nothing. We just caught up, that's all. But the whispers followed me throughout the day. During lunch, my colleague Jennifer pulled me aside. Look, Evadne, I'm not judging, but Matthew seems like a good guy. Don't you think he deserves to know if something's going on? There's nothing to know, I snapped. God, can't a married woman have a conversation with an old friend without everyone assuming the worst? That evening, I played the victim card with Matthew. People at work are being so cruel, I said, curling up against him on the couch. They're spreading rumors about me because they're jealous of my friendships. It's like high school all over again. Matthew's arm tightened around me protectively. What kind of rumors? Just stupid stuff about Friday night. They're making it sound like I was doing something wrong when I was just catching up with old friends. I looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. You trust me, don't you? Of course I do, he said, but I noticed he didn't meet my gaze. My sister Lila called later that night, full of excitement. Girl, Jonas looked so good on Friday. I can't believe you two are together again. It was like watching a movie. Lila, keep your voice down, I hissed, glancing toward the bedroom where Matthew was getting ready for bed. It wasn't like that. Sure it wasn't, she laughed. Just ignore the haters at work. They're probably jealous they don't have exciting love lives. My mother Grace called the next day, her voice careful and concerned. Honey, I heard through the grapevine that you've been spending time with Jonas again. I just want to make sure you're being smart about this. Mom, there's nothing to be smart about. We're friends. That's it. I know, sweetie, but sometimes these old flames can rekindle when we least expect it. I just don't want you to do anything you'll regret. Matthew is a good man, and Nina needs stability. Her words stung because deep down I knew she was right, but I wasn't ready to admit I'd made a mistake. Meanwhile, Matthew's mother Marjorie had started calling more frequently, ostensibly to check on Nina, but really to probe about my behavior. You seemed distracted at dinner last week, she mentioned during one call. Is everything all right with you and Matthew? Everything's fine, Marjorie. Just work stress, you know how it is. She said, and I could practically hear her disapproval through the phone. Well, family should come first, don't you think? The tension was building, and I could feel the walls closing in. But then my phone buzzed with another message from Jonas, and despite everything, my heart skipped a beat. Sunday dinner at Matthew's parents' house used to be something I looked forward to. Paul and Marjorie Ray had always been kind to me, treating me like the daughter they never had. But as we sat around their dining room table that week, the atmosphere felt arctic. Matthew had been distant all week, responding to my attempts at conversation with monosyllables. Nina sensed the tension too, staying close to my side and speaking in whispers. So, Evadne, Marjorie said, passing the roast beef with a tight smile. Matthew tells us you've been having some workplace drama. I forced a laugh. You know how office gossip can be. People have nothing better to do than make up stories. Paul cleared his throat. In my day, we kept our personal lives separate from work, avoided giving people ammunition. The comment felt pointed, and I saw Matthew's jaw tighten. Dad. I'm just saying, Paul continued, that when you're married with a child, you have to be more careful about appearances. Appearances? I set down my fork, feeling defensive. I haven't done anything wrong. I can't control what people choose to gossip about. Marjorie exchanged a look with her husband. Of course, dear, but sometimes we put ourselves in situations that can be misinterpreted. What's that supposed to mean? My voice was rising, and Nina looked up at me with worried eyes. It means, Matthew said quietly, that maybe going out alone and staying out all night isn't the best look for a married woman. The room fell silent except for the clinking of silverware. I felt ambushed, ganged up on by his entire family. I can't believe this, I said, standing up abruptly. You're all acting like I committed some terrible crime. I had drinks with friends. That's it. I'm sorry if that threatens your precious family image. Nina started to cry softly. Why is Mommy upset? Why is everyone mad? Marjorie reached over to comfort her granddaughter. Nobody's mad at you, sweetheart. The grown-ups are just having a discussion. But Nina wasn't fooled. At 6 years old, she could sense the fractures in our family foundation. My sister Leela, who had joined us for dinner, finally spoke up. This is ridiculous. Evadne is being crucified for having a social life. Matthew, you're being controlling and paranoid. Controlling? Matthew's voice was dangerously quiet. I think wanting honesty from my wife is reasonable. Honesty about what? I demanded. I've told you everything. I went out. I had drinks. I came home. What more do you want? Matthew reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. With deliberate movements, he scrolled through something before setting it on the table. I checked our phone records, he said. You've been calling Jonas. Multiple times. Late at night. The blood drained from my face. Around the table, everyone stared at the phone screen showing the evidence of my calls. We're friends, I stammered. Friends talk on the phone. At midnight? At 1 a.m.? While I'm sleeping next to you? Marjorie's face was stone cold. Evadne, I think you owe this family an explanation. But I couldn't speak. The walls were closing in, and all I could do was grab Nina's hand and head for the door, Lila following behind us. The apartment felt like a pressure cooker when we returned home. Nina went straight to her room, sensing the impending explosion between her parents. I paced the living room while Matthew sat on the couch, his head in his hands. This is insane, I said, trying to regain control of the narrative. Your family is turning everyone against me over one innocent night out. You're being paranoid and controlling, just like Lila said. Matthew looked up, his eyes red with exhaustion and hurt. Innocent? Evadne, you lied to me. Multiple times. You said you were with the girls, then with Lila, but I know you were with Jonas. So what if I was? He's an old friend. Am I not allowed to have friends? Friends don't make secret phone calls in the middle of the night. Friends don't lie about where they've been. His voice cracked slightly. I trusted you completely. I never questioned you, never checked up on you. And this is what I get. I sat down next to him, trying to take his hands, but he pulled away. Matthew, you're making this into something it's not. Yes, I should have been more upfront about seeing Jonas, but I knew you'd overreact, which is exactly what you're doing. Overreact? He stood up abruptly. My wife disappears all night, lies about where she's been, and has secret phone conversations with her ex-boyfriend. How exactly should I react? Like a mature adult who trusts his wife, I shot back. Instead, you're acting like some jealous teenager. I want us to go to counseling, he said suddenly. I think we need professional help to work through this. Counseling? I laughed bitterly. I'm not the one with trust issues, Matthew. You're the one who needs help. The next few days were a cold war. Matthew slept in the guest room, and our conversations were limited to logistics about Nina. My mother called, trying to play mediator. Honey, maybe counseling isn't such a bad idea. Sometimes an outside perspective can help. Mum, whose side are you on? I'm telling you nothing happened. Why won't anyone believe me? I want to believe you, Evadne. But your behavior lately, it's not like you. Maybe you should consider that Matthew's feelings are valid, even if you think his concerns are overblown. Even my own mother was turning against me. The isolation was suffocating. Marjorie called later that week, her voice icy. I want you to know that if you continue down this path, you'll lose this family. Matthew is a good man, and he doesn't deserve this treatment. What treatment? I haven't done anything wrong. Keep telling yourself that, dear, but actions have consequences, and yours are about to catch up with you. She was right, though I didn't realize it at the time. The next morning, while I was getting ready for work, there was a knock at the door. A courier stood in the hallway with an official-looking envelope. Evadne Ray? Yes. Please sign here. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, a petition for legal separation, and a request for full custody of Nina. Matthew had filed the papers without warning, without one last conversation. I sank to the kitchen floor, the papers scattered around me, finally understanding that my innocent mistake had cost me everything. The legal office smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat across from Matthew's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Rebecca Chen, while my hastily hired attorney fumbled through his briefcase. Matthew sat at the far end of the conference table, not meeting my eyes. Mrs. Ray, Rebecca began, My client is seeking a fair resolution to this marriage, with primary consideration for the welfare of the minor child. This is ridiculous, I interrupted. Matthew is destroying our family over nothing. I made one mistake. I should have been more honest about seeing an old friend, but this nuclear response is completely disproportionate. Rebecca slid a manila folder across the table. Perhaps you'd like to review the evidence we've compiled. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside was a comprehensive dossier of my deception, screenshots of text messages between Jonas and me, including ones I thought I'd deleted, bank statements showing charges at the wine bar, and an Uber ride to Jonas's address, work timesheets revealing unexplained absences, photos of me leaving Jonas's building early that Saturday morning. "Where did you get these?" I whispered. "Your husband is an IT consultant, Mrs. Ray. He's quite skilled at data recovery." Rebecca's voice was matter-of-fact. "He also has statements from witnesses who saw you at various locations with Mr. Leach." I looked at Matthew, who was staring at his hands. "You spied on me. You invaded my privacy." "You invaded our marriage," he said quietly. "I just documented what you were trying to hide." The evidence was damning. Text messages that read more intimately than I remembered sending. Financial records showing secret meetings I'd denied. A timeline that revealed the scope of my deception. "I want to speak to Jonas," I said desperately. "He'll tell you nothing happened." Rebecca smiled coldly. "Mr. Leach has already provided a statement. He's quite eager to distance himself from this situation. Apparently, he had no idea you were still married when you reconnected." The betrayal cut deep. Jonas had thrown me under the bus to protect himself, painting me as the aggressor who had pursued him. Meanwhile, Leela had launched a social media campaign defending my innocence, posting long rants about how society punishes women for having friendships. Her posts were backfiring, making me look even more guilty and desperate. My mother had stopped taking my calls after I accused her of abandoning me. "I love you, Evadne, but I can't support what you've done to that family," she'd said during our last conversation. Even Nina was suffering. Matthew's lawyer had arranged for her to see a child psychologist to assess the impact of our marital breakdown. The thought of my daughter in therapy because of my choices was almost unbearable. "What do you want?" I asked Matthew directly, bypassing the lawyers. He finally looked at me, and I saw years of love curdled into disappointment. "I want Nina to have stability. I want to protect what's left of my reputation. And I want you to stop lying." "I'm not lying." "Evadne," he said sadly, "you're still lying. Even now, with all this evidence in front of you, you can't admit what you did." The meeting ended with an ultimatum. Agree to Matthew's terms for separation and custody, or face a public divorce trial, where all the evidence would become part of the public record. As I left the office, I realized that my innocent mistake had become a carefully documented case study in betrayal. The family courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but it felt enormous as I sat at the defendant's table. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the case files, while Matthew and I waited for her decision on custody and asset division. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, "my client maintains that this separation is the result of a misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion. Mrs. Ray is a devoted mother who made an error in judgment, not a moral failing." I nodded emphatically. "I never technically cheated on my husband. I had drinks with an old friend and made some poor communication choices, but I didn't break my marriage vows." Judge Morrison looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Ray, the court isn't here to determine whether adultery occurred in the technical sense. We're here to determine what's in the best interest of your daughter and how to fairly divide marital assets." Matthew's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, the evidence shows a pattern of deception, secret communications, and behavior that has traumatized both the husband and child. Mr. Ray has been the primary caregiver, while Mrs. Ray has been distracted by other relationships." "That's not true," I protested. "I'm a good mother. Matthew is trying to punish me for having a social life. Mrs. Ray, the judge said firmly, I've reviewed the evidence, including the child psychologist's report. Your daughter has been exhibiting signs of anxiety and confusion about the family situation. The pattern of dishonesty documented here suggests a fundamental breakdown in trust. I tried one last manipulation. Your Honor, my husband has been cold and controlling throughout our marriage. He's using this situation to gain power over me and our daughter. I'm the victim here. The judge's expression hardened. Mrs. Ray, taking responsibility for one's actions is the first step toward rebuilding trust. Your continued denial in the face of overwhelming evidence is concerning. Leela, sitting in the gallery, had been warned twice by the bailiff to remain quiet. Her social media campaign had actually hurt my case, making me appear unremorseful and vindictive. Marjorie and Paul sat behind Matthew, their faces grave but supportive. My mother was notably absent. She'd finally given up trying to bridge the gap between us. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, Judge Morrison announced, the court awards primary custody to Mr. Ray, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Ray until she completes counseling and demonstrates behavioral changes. Regarding asset division, the words blurred together as my world collapsed. Matthew had won everything. Custody, the apartment, most of our savings. I was left with weekend visits and a court-mandated therapist. As we left the courtroom, Matthew finally looked at me directly. I hope you get the help you need, Evaden, for Nina's sake. He walked away with his head high, flanked by his parents, while I stood alone in the courthouse hallway. Lila tried to comfort me, but her words felt hollow. This isn't over, I said, but even I didn't believe it anymore. The legal papers on my kitchen table had become a reality I could no longer deny. My innocent mistake had cost me my marriage, my daughter, and my family. As I sat in my empty apartment that night, I finally began to understand the difference between making a mistake and refusing to take responsibility for it. But even then, a small voice in my head whispered that everyone else had overreacted, that I'd been treated unfairly. Some patterns of thinking are harder to break than others, and denial dies hard. The truth was laid out in black and white in legal documents and evidence folders, but I still couldn't fully accept that the villain in this story was me. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.